Hello and welcome to Zerocarbonista Series 6, The Cow in the Room. I'm Ian Collins, and this is your number one go-to environment-based podcast. The deal is this: if it's green, it is in. I'm slightly disturbed, Dale, that in many respects you're even here, because, of course, this was meant to be November, as in you say no to stuff, because you've been doing too much stuff and mooching around everywhere between courthouses and TV studios. But the word no appears to have been reinserted, or is it removed? I can't remember which, but you haven't stopped doing stuff.
No. Well, I didn't want to stop the podcast. It's like eating breakfast or something, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm gonna cancel a staple part of my week.
exactly.
And yeah, legal stuff runs to its own timetable. You know, it didn't get the memo. The legal battles.
Didn't get the no memo.
Yeah, the no memo. Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of things I just didn't want to turn down. Tonight, I'm going to go on Newsnight, for example. I didn't want to turn that down. I've got a chance, as it turns out, to talk about green energy. Nothing new there, but they want to talk about what the government can do to get bills down. And there's a few things kicking around that we've talked about on this show that they're not doing. And I'm going to remake the case for that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we got the news today, as we record this, about bills are going to be going up again in January. And I was getting a lot of emails and a message from people on the show saying, they're never, ever coming down.
Yeah. It's interesting because they just went up 1% in the latest of the regular 3 monthly reviews that Ofgem has. And that sounds like nothing. But 3 months before that, they went up 10%. And so, we're talking about 11% in the last 6 months. And bills are roughly double what they were. We're still in an energy crisis. We just aren't calling it that. It's like a perma crisis. The real issue, I think, that we face if we don't take urgent action is there'll be an international incident. There's plenty of scope for that now with the return of the Donald and Netanyahu, the war criminal, trampling all over the Middle East and so on. And our energy bills will just go through the roof again because we allow global fossil fuel prices to do a couple of really big things. The first is to set the price of our North Sea gas. So we paid 10 times more for it at the peak of the last crisis than we needed to. And then we allowed that price of gas to set the price of electricity, all electricity, even from the wind and the sun. And so, in effect, global fossil fuel markets driven by wars and fears and tensions and supply-demand shortages and manipulation, they are setting the price of the energy in this country. So we're on a roller coaster. We're not in control. We have to break the link between the price of gas and electricity. We have to cap the price of North Sea gas so that international markets can't drive that up. And one other thing, the DNOs, I think we talked about it on this podcast before, the district network operators, it's not the national grid, it's the kind of regional grids. They're allowed to make a 40% profit margin, whereas energy suppliers are allowed to make 1.5%. Ofgem regulates both of them, gives licenses to both of them. Only one of them is a complete natural monopoly, and that's the DNOs. Mostly foreign owned from tax havens, sucking billions from our energy bills out of our economy. And those three things together could knock £600 or £700 off our energy bills almost overnight.
Why won't somebody do it?
I think it's seen as being a little bit difficult, which I have to say I'm disappointed in, because when you've got the kind of political mandate that Labour gained at the election, you've got the currency to go out and do the bold things. In fact, I would argue that that's what the public wants you to do. That's why they voted in such huge numbers, for a different government and a different approach. My concern is that by the next election, if energy bills aren't down, people will think, well, it hasn't made a difference. And I think renewable energy on its own is firstly going to take a long time to bring bills down, because it's going to take at least 5 years to get to 2030's target of 100% green. But at the same time, if we don't break the link to international fossil fuel markets, then we're not in control of our own energy bills anyway, renewable or not. So, I'm going to carry on banging on about it.
Do so.
Tonight on Newsnight.
Well, you mentioned Newsnight, and it's fair to say it's not just down market programs you appear on. You also appeared with me because there was a discussion about the pigs and the cigs.
I like that.
This is the cigarette-style warnings on bacon. I read this. Actually, I think I read it last weekend. Was it Sunday morning? I might have read it in my Sunday papers, Dale, and thought, there he is. Yeah. That's Dale. And explain for those who don't know the story what it's all about.
I will do. I like cigs and pigs. I just want to say that I've been using Fags and Bacon because it sounds a little bit like eggs and bacon, but I'm going to
True.
think about using yours. I'm not sure. But look, I did an interview with the BBC and the Telegraph, I think it was, all at the same time. Could have been the Sunday Times, actually. Or no, it was. And we talked about a bunch of different things, but one of them was food. And I just pointed out that bacon is on the same list of carcinogens that the World Health Organization holds. It's a grade 1 carcinogen, same list as tobacco. And tobacco, we regulate the hell out of, hide packets behind closed doors, take branding off the packets and replace them with pictures of diseased organs. And we make it very clear that smoking kills you. Bacon we stick in a supermarket freezer, maybe with the picture of a happy pig on it, but all of the surroundings and the presentation of bacon to people are that it's okay. There's no sign to your bacon shopper that what you're about to do is a bad thing. And I've just seen a headline on the BBC website. Somebody's done a study and they reckon that a bacon roll is worth 4 cigarettes in terms of cancer risk and life shortening.
Wow. And you're right. I don't, even by meat eating standards, I don't know why you'd put a picture of a smiling pig on the packet of bacon. I mean, that's just a bit twisted, right? I mean, just don't do that shit.
But this is how animal products are sold to us. We see happy cows in fields, producing milk, when the reality is awful compared to that. I mean, it's a life, a short, brutal life of constant rape, child abduction, and abuse for a dairy cow, and that's an interesting point, because I think we might be coming onto a story about the lack of inspectors of farms to maintain animal welfare standards. And animal welfare is kind of, it's an unseen problem, and we are sold something that is not only bad for us without being told it's bad for us, but it's very bad for animals, and we aren't told that either.
Yeah. We'll look at that in a few moments. Just a word on COP29. That is now finished.
Thank God.
I can't remember what godforsaken oil-producing nation it was in this time, but they seem to be on a bit of a merry-go-round of saying, was it Azerbaijan? Was it?
It was, yeah.
Egypt, the last one. Who decides to put these things in oil places? Or is that by design?
I think it's something that the UN have done consciously. I think hoping to bring these people into the tent. I can understand the logic. I never thought it was a good idea myself, and we've seen 2 in a row now where it's clearly not working. I'd say it's backfiring. The president of this COP in Azerbaijan, he opened the proceedings of the whole event by saying that oil and gas were a gift from God, and that nobody should be criticized for using them, which is just incredible. It sets an awful tone.
Yeah, it's a bit weird. Do you think the overarching point of the COPs needs to be kind of recalibrated? Is it sort of has something got lost in these, considering the size of these events, considering what they are setting out to do? I'm not getting much from it. I'm not hearing, daily headlines. I hear there's 1 or 2 bits, and every now and again we talk about it. It almost needs. I mean, it couldn't be any bigger in terms of the size of the invitees and all that it takes to put it on. But I sense the message is a little bit lost in this.
Yeah, I think so. Certainly from the outside, it looks bogged down in squabbling over language, but fundamentally squabbling over the pace at which we should move, and who pays the bill, who bears the brunt of the not pulling oil from the ground, for example, also the brunt of the current climate crisis, the damage that's causing in the global south, all kinds of wrangling about who pays and who suffers and that kind of stuff. When in fact, of course, we're all going to pay and we're all going to suffer if we don't get our fingers out. I mean, this is COP29, gives you a sense of how long it's been going for. I went to COP3 in 1997.
Wow.
And it's going to be COP30 next year. That's a long old journey.
You must have been like 3 when you went there, Dale, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Here's one, Dale. Our favourite subject, heat pumps. Without mentioning that bloke, this is about the noise of pumps.
Yeah, different kind of noise, right? The actual from the pumps, not from the proponents of pumps. It's an interesting story because it reminds me a little bit of a previous Tory administration that was so intent on forcing fracking on an unwilling nation that they changed everything. They changed planning law, they changed property law, and they changed the economic background as well to force this thing through. And this is not that extreme, but Labour are adhering to the Johnson-era policy of a heat pump in every home, and they can see that one of the biggest obstacles, apart from the bizarre economics and the fact that 20% of homes can never have one, and on and on and on, apart from that, big obstacle is noise. The idea of 6 million heat pumps in London, if you can imagine that, all sticking out at 60 dBA, which is a human ear weighted kind of acoustic scale, which we use actually to assess the noise of wind turbines as heard at the nearest property. So we have like a separation distance, it's a few hundred meters, and you start with the predicted noise. And 60 dBA, I think, it's a long time since I looked at it, but I think it's around about the noise of a big windmill. If you're stood, I don't know, maybe 100 yards away. Now, the current legislation is you can have that a meter from your neighbor's property. But
so
60,
these things make a freaking racket, is the point.
Yeah, imagine 6 million of them humming away 24/7.
Just in a whole street, though.
Yeah, incredible. And people are going to stick them out the backs of their houses, which is, where your garden might be if you've got a garden, or or out the front. I mean, one man's heat pump is going to be the next door neighbor's bloody nuisance, right? In terms of noise, although maybe when everyone's got one, nobody will care. We'll all hate each other.
Just start shouting, talking louder. Maybe that's the answer to it.
The idea is to allow more noise from heat pumps at a 1 meter distance to your neighbor's house. Which
why would they allow more noise?
So that you can get more heat pumps. At the moment, it's a bar. It's a problem, because these things are noisy.
Because I'd never heard the noise argument. I mean, we've done so many debates on it. People have said, well, they're not efficient in as they could be. The arguments you've made, Dale, some people arguing they're too big. Lots of places that are just not conducive with a heat pump. But I didn't know about the pesky noise thing.
Yeah. Well, I think, they're probably at the moment tending to be installed in bigger properties, perhaps that, aren't close to neighbors and stuff like that. But the reality is, once we start cramming them into towns and cities by the million, and, we need 30 million of them in our country, there's going to be a significant
So they've removed
noise.
a barrier to it.
They're lowering it, yeah.
Okay.
Not removed it completely, but they're going to allow more noise nuisance.
It'll be a bit noisier. So... Okay.
I think 60 dBA is really quite loud.
That's
actually
quite a freaking racket if you're sleeping above it.
Yeah, you want your windows open or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like aircon. I don't know where,
that makes a freaking racket as well, right?
It's just the same. Yeah.
Here's a question. Here's a question from Julie, who says, Dale, you're Prime Minister for the day. What cow in the room policy would you enact first?
I think it would be, that's an easy question. I'm going to say that, Julie. Thank you. It's because there's going to be health warnings on animal products, right? It's the campaign of the moment. I think it's simple, and I think it'll make a big impact if people just know that actually this stuff is not good for you.
Here's one from Eleanor. What an absolute breath of fresh air to hear you on BBC Radio 4 this morning. What's going on, Dale? I could have jumped for joy at your response to the question on whether the Labour Party would harm business. I wish I could hear you more than just the podcast.
Well, you can catch me occasionally on Ian's show.
And in Liverpool next weekend.
Oh, yeah, well done. You're the pro.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. Something. We're going to be at Expedition 1 at the Exhibition Centre in Liverpool. 11:30. It's free as well, isn't it? 11:30.
Yeah,
in fact, Radio 4, I think, are also there as well.
Oh, I think they might have cancelled Radio 4. I think they might have done.
Well, they found out we were there. They thought, we're not taking those suckers on.
That's what it is. Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of next iteration of Act 1.5. The thing that Massive Attack launched on the Downs at the end of the summer is going to reappear in Liverpool, almost citywide. Is the kind of the scale of it. Liverpool City Council are adopting it for their venues and stuff, and I think it's 2 or 3 days of gigs. It's called an Accelerator City event, and some other kind of terms I don't quite get, but it's being done with the UN as well. Liverpool are winning some kind of first of a kind UN status as a result of it. So, and it's all good stuff.
11:30. We are there at the Exhibition Centre in Liverpool, and it's totally free. I'm looking forward to that, actually.
Oh, that's good.
We're going to have some vegan food beforehand.
Listen, the only food All right, it's either that or you don't eat. Them's the rules.
Simple as that, yeah. Or you starve. Let's talk about farming, because there is a new voice for farmers. He is Jeremy Clarkson. What's your take on this, Dave?
I think he's a buffoon. Um, I mean, he's a great entertainer. I mean, and I love him for that. You've got Dyson, who waded into the debate, haven't you? He bought up, I don't know, 26,000 acres of Britain or something. And it looks like he did it to avoid inheritance tax because he's made such a fuss at the budget change that Labour have produced. Clarkson pops up and also makes a fuss, but forgetting that he told the media he bought the farm to avoid inheritance tax.
Did he do that? If I can just put my Jeremy Clarkson's wife's hat on for a second, Dale. Did he? Because he writes all sorts of outrageous stuff in his columns. So, I mean, I think I read that at the time. I've just bought a farm, only did it to avoid inheritance tax. And I remember thinking, well, that's just him with a funny gag. But it's unfortunately come back to haunt him because it's now been taken, like literally the reason he bought a farm was to avoid that. And I'm sure he's got loads of other money somewhere else where he wouldn't avoid inheritance. So I don't know. I've got no idea. But I wonder whether that was, of all the sticks that critics have beaten Clarkson with, is that the best one?
His response actually has been to say, well, I wasn't telling the truth, actually. And the reason I wanted to buy a farm was so I could shoot some pheasants. But he thought that was a less appealing notion than avoiding tax. So he went with the tax dodging. What kind of guy is he?
If in doubt, just go with the tax dodging one. Do you think he is a voice for the countryside?
Well, I find this whole issue quite remarkable, really. I don't think he's a voice for the countryside, no, but he is a voice, and people rally behind him. His farming program has attracted a lot of people to kind of understand farming better, and that's a good thing as well. But what I find remarkable in this whole debate is the idea that it's wrong for farmers to pay the same tax as everybody else, inheritance tax. And so, I've heard people in interviews saying, oh, but, farmers love and cherish their land. They can't make a lot of money from it. And they shouldn't have to pay tax when they pass it on. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but there must be millions of people in our country who feel the same way about their family home. They can't make money from it.
Nick on LinkedIn said that he was disappointed with your views. He says, being a farmer's son in the green space, I know firsthand how hard farming is, outworking 99% of the working population for mostly under minimum wage or loss. Profitable farms take multi-generations to build, and this single policy will end farming as we know it. Talk about cutting the hand off that feeds you.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I've seen those arguments as well. But I mean, firstly, I want to say, why should farmers not pay inheritance tax on these assets when everybody else has to? Millions of people want to pass their family home on without paying tax, but they can't. Farmers have enjoyed a loophole for a very long time of no inheritance tax. Even now, if you're captured by it as a farmer, and I mean, the numbers do vary. I think some parts of government say only 6% of farms are affected. But even if you're captured by it, you pay half the rate of tax as somebody will on their house, their home. So I find it a bit exceptional to be having this discussion. The idea that we'll suffer food shortages, well, you've got to bear in mind 85% of our food comes from abroad. It's not made on farms here. And look, plenty of people work hard, Nick. I think it was Nick. Plenty of people work all hours, for for bad pay in bad conditions with no security, and they aren't sat on a several £1 million asset of land, which would give them that security. And I'm not saying farmers are rich. I mean, some are. Clarkson obviously is. And I know that some farmers struggle. What we actually need is a reformed farming system. I think farmers have been penned into a corner by subsidies. It's like welfare. When I lived on the road, people that claimed a dole, they would circle around the same town all of the time. It was like they were on a chain. Because they would wait for the weekly gyro, and then they weren't free to go somewhere and do something different. And I think farmers are like that with farming subsidies. They become dependent on them. They aren't enough. There's the subsistence levels of income on a lot of farms. And I think we need to break that chain and actually find a transition future for farming away from the old way of doing things and towards this new net zero thing, different kinds of food, different kinds of farming, bringing wildlife back, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Just before we get to X-rated corner, which I know you love, Dale, let's just talk windmills for a second. Dale's 100 windmills for Gloucestershire being questioned by the local council's environment member. What
Yes.
in the name of Windy Miller is going on?
He said he had grave concerns, and honestly, it just made me laugh out loud. As somebody was coming into my office, I said, "I don't mind me. I'm just having a bit of fun." But I read this thing, and he's got grave concerns about seeing a windmill out of his window. What does he say about the climate crisis? I mean, what adjective could he possibly conjure up that is proportional to grave in terms of seeing a windmill when it comes to what the climate crisis is going to do? And by the way, the climate crisis won't leave that landscape untouched, the one he wants to protect. It'll devastate that along with everything else.
Sure.
And also, by the way, it's a man-made landscape. And this argument has been around since, modern wind energy began in Britain 30 years ago. The idea that the landscape we see is some kind of wild, natural form. It isn't. It's man-made through farming. And that windmills are a blot on the landscape, when all of these surveys ever undertaken by anybody show the vast majority of people think windmills look good, appreciate them for the job they do. So this is an old argument from 30 years ago.
What about the argument? I love a windmill, but what about the argument that it apparently it puts off tourists?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And then that's
Did
part of what
anybody ever in the history of human existence cancel a holiday because there was a windmill there?
It's crazy. And again, this is an old myth from 30 years ago. And several surveys have been undertaken in tourist spots, asking people if it made any difference, that kind of stuff. And somebody wrote to me this week by email to make this point. And I said, when did you last hear somebody say that I'm not going to Cornwall for a holiday because they've got windmills? Right? I've never heard it.
Yeah, we were thinking of Cornwall, but someone put a f***ing windmill up.
And more than one. They've got plenty of them.
We had to cancel the holiday
because noise. I mean, we talked about noise earlier, didn't we? There was another one of the kind of early obstacles to wind energy. The idea that you could hear them. I mean, the level of allowable noise from a windmill at a property is something like 40 dBA, something like that.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about heat pumps being allowed to pump out 60.
There you go.
And it is answer. It's a logarithmic scale, right? So 60 isn't 50% bigger than 40. That's not how it works.
Let's do X-rated corner. Dale Vince is bad for your health and should have a warning on his, says Chris D 9181027. Loads of numbers.
Yeah. Loads of numbers and not a complete sentence. Thank you, Chris.
No, yeah, that's it. Someone else here, I can't even pronounce it, says, led by donkeys, private eye, Dale Vince, hope not hate, the Labour Party, led by donkeys, said it twice, the complete circle jerk, says a man who just repeated the words in his own circle. You'll struggle to find more soy and less testosterone in any other group on earth.
I can't believe it. Gender slurs thrown in there as well, or vegan gender slurs. I'm not really sure what's going on with that man. Or what a jerk circle is. I never heard of that. What do you do in your spare time,
brilliant.
mister?
We have absolutely stumbled across a whole new phraseology here. He's part of the jerk circle.
I want to know where it comes from. What kind of activity leads to that phrase?
Well, only he knows. Here's one that comes in from Graham, J978, loads of numbers. Zealots like Dale Vince would be quite happy to see our farmers go bankrupt. If they had their way, we'd all be living on a diet of lettuce and nuts. Yeah. What's up with you, Dale? You lettuce and nuts advocate.
Yeah, look, I just talked about farming, didn't I? What I think needs to happen, is a proper review of farming, a restructure, just a new approach that everybody can benefit from. I don't want farmers to go out of business, but I want them to change their business. We've got to stop animal farming. We've got to bring back nature, and we can do all of these things. And actually, we can improve the lot for farmers and for our health and the climate crisis and blah, blah, blah. We can do all of that, but not by ranting on X.
There it is. Listen, the next podcast will be, well, that's it for this one, Dale, but the next one will be the one we record live in Liverpool, Saturday the 30th, Expedition 1 at the Exhibition Centre in Liverpool. It's 11:30 in the morning. It's totally free to come to, and we'll be recording it for the next episode of this. You can follow Dale on social media. Which of course is twitter.com or x.com/Dale Vince, facebook.com/Dale Vince, and I think I'm right in saying, Dale, TikTok too.
TikTok too. Yeah, I think you're right.